Hello everyone, Cujo here in the hangar. I've got 7-8 Yankee back finally after the engine transplant, so I took it for a break-in flight today, which is kind of weird. I'm not used to going balls to the wall relatively low at those kind of speeds and power levels, but got to get the break-in done. So that is ongoing, but it sure feels good to have the plane back. So in the comments for how buying an airplane works video, when I did that video for 70 Yankee, I had a question about how I determined my mission. So I thought I would talk to that in a relatively concise video here while I was at the hangar, because it wasn't cut and dry. So I figured I would kind of walk through the process that I took. So bear with me. My ideal plane, when I decided I was going to look to buy my own, or maybe a partnership, a two-way partnership, I really wanted a nice Lance or maybe an earlier Saratoga. I have a lot of aero time, a lot of Piper time. I feel comfortable in the Pipers. I had flown a Lance once. It basically flew like a faster, bigger aero. It was very comfortable. Obviously, plenty of room for the family, so that's what I would have liked. Unfortunately, when I started looking after I got my instrument rating, the market was just crazy, and you couldn't touch a decent Lance or Saratoga for anything less than 200,000. Probably not even close, to be honest. You're probably looking at 250 for something nice that didn't need a lot of work. So I kind of, unfortunately, felt like I had to move on from that unless I just waited some years. The next thought I had was, well, the Aero that I had a partnership in Iowa actually served the family fairly well, and I was, like I said, very comfortable flying it. So a really nice Aero, whether NA or turbo, was the next thing I considered. Like I said, very comfortable in it. It has about 1,000-pound useful load. So I looked at that. Unfortunately, again, the market was crazy, and nice Aero was upwards of 150 at the time, some even more than that, and I just refused to pay that for basically a trainer, because that's what an Aero is. It's often considered a complex trainer. And so that was also upsetting, because, like I said, I was very comfortable in them. Would have been comfortable getting a nice one, but I looked around and that wasn't going to happen. So then I went back and I considered the mission. Okay, so now I'm getting outside of what I immediately thought I wanted based on previous experience. And the key items in my mission is that I wanted at least 135 knots of cruise speed. I had become used to that with the Aero that I was in a partnership and you know, I wasn't. Anytime I get an Archer or a Warrior, like when I was doing my instrument training, I was crawling. I couldn't deal with that anymore. So at least 135 knots worth of cruise speed, and I kind of set it there on purpose, because that left a relatively reasonable selection of planes. After that, about 1,000 pounds useful load, if not more, because I figured I would have my family in the plane sometimes for some cross-country work. I realized it wouldn't be like the majority of the time, but I wanted to be able to get my family of 4 and some bags in the plane. So at least about 1,000-pound useful load. If it was 950, it's probably okay, but around there. And it had to be comfortable for the family. So this one was key. I had, a while back, I sat in a Mooney, and I know this is going to anger Mooney people, but I really didn't like it. And I thought I would. I really actually liked the idea of the efficiency of a Mooney. I like the look of the Mooney, the way it's built. But I sat in one, granted it was an older one, and the tapered footwells on that one, it made me feel claustrophobic. I didn't like it at all, and I realized the newer ones have more room, but I don't think Moonies have ever been considered roomy family planes necessarily. So, like I said, although the family wasn't going to be in the plane a lot, I want a plane that will allow me to take the family on some trips. So I ruled out Moonies based on that requirement, and I wanted something that was relatively comfortable and roomy. It didn't have to be a six-seater, but it had to be roomy enough. I was fine with retract. I had a reasonable amount of retract time with the Arrow, but it had to be, if it was a retract, it had to be a robust gear. So although there was a lot to like about retract Cessnas, like 182 RGs and Cardinal retracts, I do not like the Cessna retract. It's a hydraulic system. Sure, they have a backup pump, but if you spring a leak in the hydraulics, it doesn't matter how many pumps you have, the gear ain't going down. And so I ruled that out. Pipers have, anyone who's flown a Piper, it's really kind of a fail-safe, seamless gear system. It is electro-hydraulic, but it's by default down. It's pulled up with hydraulics and locked in place. All you do is you pull a lever and they fall out. The gear just falls out with gravity. So that's pretty foolproof. Also, the Bonanzas actually have a fully mechanical gear. Basically, electric motor turns a wheel, a flywheel-like thing, which mechanically puts the gear in and out. And if that motor fails, then there is a crank that directly mechanically turns the wheel. So again, a mechanical system, a lot to like there. So that was kind of my thinking on the retract. But I also did want to consider 182s with fixed gear, a capable plane. I don't have time in 182s, but I realize that they're kind of good at just about everything, not great, but also not terrible at anything. Good load hauler, two doors, and decent load carrying. So I looked at that. Unfortunately, Cessnas were the ones that were spiking the most in price, and again, you couldn't come close to a nice 182 for anything less than 160, 170, 180, something like that, and that was like a 40-year-old, 45-year-old plane. So I really struggled with that. So and there wasn't a lot, to be honest. At the time, there wasn't a lot of inventory. The 182s were flying off the shelf, so that wasn't looking positive. I wanted something that was reliable and easy to maintain, something that anybody could work on, something that there was enough of them out there where spare parts and such wouldn't be a problem. At one point, I got interested, at least I thought it was worth a look at Commanders, Rockwell Commanders. Roomy, sturdy planes, no doubt about it. I even went and looked at one here on the north side of Chicago. No doubt, a sturdy, manly plane, very roomy, but there weren't a lot made. A lot of them were relatively old, and the guy who was showing me that one happened to be an A&P as well, and he was showing me his handiwork, how he had to rebuild an aux spar, and telling me how much money it costs if anything goes wrong because the parts aren't readily available and you got to fabricate things. And I just was like, I was kind of turned off to the Commander just because of that. Nice planes, I did like a lot about those, but I didn't want something that it was going to need a lot of work because they were older, and I'm going to need things fabricated by special A&Ps. It just sounded kind of like a nightmare for what I was looking for. I wanted something a little bit more turnkey, so I kind of turned those off. And Cessna Cardinals are nice planes too, roomy as well. They look neat. I actually liked those, but without the retract, they were kind of underpowered. And with a fixed gear Cardinal, they were also old. But there weren't a ton of them made, although at least it was a Cessna. But 130 knots would probably be, you'd be lucky. I think if you got there with the fixed gear version. So, I considered all that, and to be honest, I was getting really disheartened with the whole thing and thinking, maybe this was a fool's errand. Maybe I need to pack it up and I'll look in a couple of years, which was disappointing because I was ready. But then I thought to myself, well, why don't I take a look at four-seat Bonanzas? The six-seaters, they were priced out of my range. I mean, you couldn't touch an A36 for less than 250, 300 probably. So that wasn't going to happen without a partner. I guess I should talk about my range. I was, at the time, I had upped it. I wasn't looking to go this high originally, but given the market, I was looking at something like 100 to 175K if it was just me. And for 175K, I was like, this better be turnkey, okay? If it was 100 and it needed a few things, that would be okay. Ideally, it needed to be, solid IFR platform. Having put some avionics in my Aero in Iowa, I know that adds up quick. I mean, we just put a GPS transponder and an audio panel. It was over $30,000 in the Aero. So I knew that would add up fast. So if it had reasonable, solid IFR avionics, that would be good. And I was like, okay, I can't afford an A36, just like I can't afford a Saratoga or Lance right now. So what about a four-seat Bonanza? I had loosely read some things about them. They have AFCG tendencies. I like the look of the V-tail and the capability, but there is a rudder vader problem where it's really hard, if not damn near impossible, to get magnesium rudder vader skins anymore. So if you have corrosion or you whack the tail on a hanger or something like that, or someone else whacks it, you're kind of up a creek and the plane's grounded. So that kept me from looking at V-tails, that alone, because I didn't want a chance, putting that kind of investment in something that's going to get grounded that easily, and then I couldn't even, it's not even a matter of money. I couldn't even get it up in the air. There were no skins available. So, but I was like, okay, let's look at straight tails. And I had flown a Debonair years back. Nice plane. Hard to find a nice Debonair. There weren't a ton of them, but I was looking there, and other 33 Bonanzas. There was a decent E33 out there when I was looking, and quite a few F33s, although they were newer. The F33As were newer, and so prices were kind of higher. But what I found was four-seat Bonanzas, although their prices had gone up like everything else in the market, they didn't go up the same percentage as like a Cessna or a Piper product. So that was encouraging. So what I did is I went on like Beach Talk and Type Club stuff, and I was putting some forum posts asking about the plane, stating my mission and my family kind of situation and what I was looking for. And and I also looked at some weight and balance calculators, and I figured my family's small enough that I could work around the AFCG limitations of a four-seat Bonanza. So it could be a decent family hauler for my family. Yes, the FCG is a little wonky, but it would work with my family, and it definitely could carry the useful load. They can carry over 1,000 pounds relatively easily if you can keep it in CG. So I started posting on the forum, and right away I actually got a private message from a gentleman who, for his own personal reasons, was looking to sell his 78 Yankee here. He had a situation where the engine was at TVO. It was still running well, but he knew it was coming, that it was going to need an investment, and he could do that, but he didn't know how long he was going to be flying and so forth. So he basically, it hadn't hit market yet, and so he started a conversation with me, and obviously I was interested. I looked into it, looked at the logs, eventually went and looked at it in person, and it's a really clean, nicely maintained F-33A. And he also, because it wasn't on the market, he wasn't working with a broker, he was really asking a very reasonable amount of money for it, given everything else in the market, to the point that it was within my range. Granted, it needed an engine, which would take it outside of my range, but it was running well, and I knew what I was getting into, and plus I knew it would take some time to get an engine anyway, the way supply chain was. So I worked with him, and it all worked out really well. And when I stop and think about how I could have bought essentially a trainer, like a Piper Arrow, for, let's say, similar money. Um, but I have a 91, mind you, a 1991, so much newer, four-seat F-33A Bonanza for similar money. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. So it all kind of just fell into place. Um, Someone was looking over my shoulder, I guess. So it's been great, great decision. And yes, I have just put a 550 in it, which brings me over my budget for sure. But this thing now I know, brand new engine. I'll take care of it. I know where it came from. I know the plane otherwise is in great shape. All the AMPs I've had look at it were very impressed. So I really, like I said, and plus when you consider what rates are, the inflationary situation and the market conditions, I got a steal because even though with the engine I'm well above what I wanted to pay originally, this plane is worth a lot more just because of market conditions, inflation, and I'm paying. Well, I paid a decent chunk of it, and I have a loan on it, and the loan is at a minimal interest rate. So I really can't say enough good things about it. And yeah, someday, sure, I have to upgrade the avionics probably, but it's a solid IFR platform. So hopefully that was maybe a little bit of a long-winded explanation of how I got to um, the four-seat Bonanza from my original mission setting. Uh, but just to summarize, my mission was at least 135 knots of cruise, at least about 1,000-pound useful load, comfortable, roomy enough for my family of four when they were in it, something reliable and robust that could be worked on and had a reliable gear system if it was a retract, and something in the 100 to 175K range, at the higher end needing to be really turnkey and having solid IFR capability. So that's what I set out to find. So keep the questions coming, and hopefully that answered everything. Thanks.